Okay, this video is what can we learn from chimpanzee diets about our health. Theoretically, chimps are our nearest common biological ancestor, that theoretically we evolved from a common ancestor. And a couple things I want to say. Take a look at Jane Goodall, the famous chimpanzee researcher, and a chimp. Do they really look the same to you? You're going to hear nonsense about human DNA and chimp DNA being 99% similar. Jane Goodall and this chimp are not 99% similar. I once dated a girl in high school who had a twin, not identical, but just a twin. And her twin sister was also quite pretty, and I would say she's about 95% like her sister, okay? This chimp is not, all right? Every man, will tell you, we can't help it. We love women, we love looking at women, and when a woman walks in front of us, something in our brain says, would you sleep with her, yes or no? We can't help it. It just happens. Its main thing is she's skinny. Her waist is smaller than her hips or butt. We can't help it, okay? And what I'm trying to say is you look at Jane Goodall, automatically your brain just says, yes, you would. You look at that chimp, it's disgusting. It looks like a giant spider. Not in a million years. Not with, 24 beers on board. You would never want to have sex with that. And I'm just saying, as biologically, it's incredibly different from us. As a matter of fact, I just tell you a story. Many, many years ago, I was walking down the hallway with one of my buddies at the hospital, and there's this girl walking in front of us, was real pretty with that perfect shape. And I said to my friend, gosh, I would give half my salary to have her in my bed. And he said, oh, she would want a lot more than that. And I thought to myself, what an advantage women have over men, that we like them a lot more than they like us. And, look at marriage. It's a typical way a wife can easily control a husband. And a lot of times, too, you'll hear women say something like, well, I like sex just as much as a man does. With a guy I really like, after a nice dinner, we go to a movie or something. Of course, it's very enjoyable. My guy friends say things to me like, I would have sex with her on the bathroom floor while my friend was taking a dump in the same room. Okay, I mean, it's quite different how men are compared to women. It's just a fact. Anyways. All right, let's get on with this talk about chimpanzees and nutrition and health. All right, now look at these chimps. You're going to tell me they're 98% difference? It's all a question of how you analyze the DNA. You can throw out all the non-protein coding DNA, and you could not include, duplications and all kinds of other things. There's lots of things you can do to make them seem much more similar or much more different, okay? Look at these chimps, okay? They walk on their hands. They're knuckle walkers. Their hand is quite flat compared to ours. They're sort of a little bit designed for climbing around in trees. Look how small their forehead is and the way their jaw juts out because they have small frontal lobes. Compared to humans, chimps are stupid. Their brain is less than 1/3 the size of ours. It's about 28% the size of our brain. They can't count. They don't have any significant language. Chimps are stupid and they're incredibly violent. Even though they're a lot smaller than us, they're about 4 times as strong as us. A chimp could rip the crap out of a human. Look at their butts. Our butts don't look like that. They're hairy everywhere. How long their forearms are. The more you look at it, they're not just different in one spot. They're different in tons of spots. Okay, when I was in high school, there was this Italian girl who had kind of hairy forearms, but she was still cute. And so what I'm trying to say is we are so different than chimps, it's not even funny. There's sort of this movement afoot to try to make people think they're no different than chimps, and it's not true. We're incredibly different than chimps. And the 3 chimps here on a log reminds me of hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. But their pelvis structure is different, their bones are different, their feet are different. They're different in every way. So many ways it's not even funny. So don't believe all this stuff you hear about evolution. Most of this evolutionary stuff that's taught to kids in schools is not true. You'd be amazed at how much scientists lie about the biology for the origin of life, for the origin of complexity. And by the way, evolutionary biology has nothing to do with the origin of life. The origin of life is abiogenesis. How is life created from non-life? That's one giant subject over here. Evolution is how does life develop variety from life. It's life from life rather than non-life to life. They're 2 totally different subjects. And then here is sort of the foundational biblical view concept of human life. that humans are created in the image of God. And this is the most important painting of all the paintings in the history of the world. Because the human created in the image of God is entitled to natural rights, is a creature that is partly divine, and therefore should be treated with respect and kindness and entitled to freedom. If a human is just a talking monkey, then, where you put monkeys in a cage. They have no intrinsic rights. Okay, we got to get to the diet here. This is sort of just the build-up, the exciting intro. Okay, now, what do chimps eat? Chimps get about 95% of their calories from plants. Some sources said 97%. They get about 5% of their calories from meat. Baby chimps typically nurse for about 5 years, according to the Jane Goodall Institute. And Jane Goodall, of course, was that lady in that picture, and she's like the most famous chimpanzee researcher. So 5 years of nursing, and then they stay with their mothers for some years beyond that. My experience of looking at humans is, look at a woman's shoulder. A woman got smaller shoulders than a man. She don't got as much upper body strength. And I remember, I was a wrestler ever since I was a little kid. In 6th grade, I won like the village championship. I think I was kind of cocky when I came home and arrogant. And I pissed off my mother, okay? She picked me up and she threw me on the bed. And I'm like, wow, my mom could kick my ass. So when I was in 6th grade, I was a pretty strong kid and my mom could kick my butt. Okay, but, I weighed about 110 in 7th grade and I got a lot bigger from 6th grade to 7th grade. And there was like no way in a million years my mom could kick my butt when I was in 7th grade. And the reason I say that is, that's pretty typical for a woman is strong enough to control her sons until they hit puberty. When they hit puberty, in hunter-gatherer society, the boys go with their fathers and they go learn how to hunt. They go learn how to do all the other things that the men in that community do. All right, so, why wouldn't a woman have bigger shoulders? I think it's because everyone was always worried about starving to death. And so what would be the point in her having big shoulders if she didn't need to have them, and to put her at increased risk to starve to death and increased risk that she would not be able to deliver enough nutrients to the baby? In a hunter-gatherer society, in ancestral societies like that, when a woman has her first period, she's pregnant by the end of the year, and then she'll spend the rest of her life either pregnant or nursing. Like the Bantus, for example, the woman will nurse for typically, 3-4 years. That's pretty routine. She stops nursing, has a period, she's pregnant again. So, our society's actually bizarre. It's a modern thing, that women want to delay their babies until they're in their 30s after they've completed their education and established themselves at their job. And, sadly, a lot of them end up not being able to have a baby. The more educated a woman is, the less likely she is to ever have a baby. And they're going to miss that, Women love babies and kids more than men do. I don't even know if my kids are mine. Who the hell knows, okay? So there's a reason why we're so aloof. Anyways, getting back to chimps. Plant foods. The majority of calories from fruits the chimps eat, and by figs. I was kind of surprised by that. They get more than half of their calories from figs. So maybe that Fig Newton commercial wasn't so far-fetched. They eat mangoes, watermelons, whatever else is around, they're given to them. I don't know if all this stuff is native to their Africa. Chimps only live in Africa, too. They don't have the variety of abilities to go live in other places. They're not adaptable like humans. They're too stupid, okay? Fruits are their first choice of foods. They will eat some other plant foods, a lot of leaves, flowers. When they can get their hands on honey, they'll take it. They'll even eat tree bark. They'll eat seeds, palm nuts. There's other types of nuts they eat that they crack on rocks. They'll also eat ants and termites. Jane Goodall did some of the first research to film them using a stick to draw termites out of their nest and eat them like a snack. If they can get their hands on birds' eggs or lizards, they will. But then the thing that shocked everyone from Jane Goodall's little Aren't Chimps Wonderful World is when they filmed them hunting colobus monkeys. They'll eat as many colobus monkeys as they can get their hands on. They'll also gang up and kill baboons and eat the baboons. And chimpanzees will also eat other chimpanzees. They're very territorial. If a chimp from another group wanders into their area, the male chimps will just kill that chimp and they'll eat him. Okay? So chimps are very brutal. Another thing too is look at a chimp's mouth. A chimp's got these giant canines. I mean, they're big. So chimps will use them for fighting. I wonder why humans don't have big canines. I mean, it's because we're a herbivore, and also because we're more skilled with our hands. We could throw a rock and, or whatever. So we're a little bit better in that sense. Chimp body weight. The male chimp's kind of small, only weighs about 130 pounds. Female chimp, about 100 pounds. But they're much stronger. They literally have been described as being 4 times stronger than humans. They kick humans' asses. So there's multiple different explanations for that. They're kind of designed for swinging around in the trees. We're not. I mean, we can do it a little bit, but Tarzan was sort of a movie. We can't do it like a chimp does. Chimps live, at least half as long as we do, and really a little more than half, about 2/3 as long as we do. Like I said, they're really territorial, super territorial, and they're super violent, which is kind of a scary thing. If we're really related to chimps as much as some people claim we are, that's not encouraging. Okay, it's one of the reasons why you want to emphasize our difference from chimps rather than our similarities. Here's a quote from the Bible, Genesis 4:9. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," Cain answered. "Am I my brother's keeper?" And my advice would be, we better learn to be each other's keeper and help each other. Otherwise, we're in trouble. You don't want to live like chimps. They're just brutal. Study like baboon behavior too. They're just awful and brutal, okay? They really are primitive, violent, stupid animals, all right? Let's see. African leopards, they only weigh about 200 pounds, these African leopards, but man, they're great at climbing trees, and they'll hunt a chimpanzee. I'd be scared of a chimpanzee. African rock python constrictor, 20 feet long, weighs about 120 pounds. They can swallow a chimp, so they constrict around it, and they can swallow it if they catch a chimp by itself. The chimp's brain, like I said, is about less than 1/3 of ours, 28% of ours. Our brain's over around 3 pounds. Chimp brain's less than 1 pound. We got the big frontal lobes, the big forehead. Our forehead juts out compared to their smushed, flat foreheads. We're all considered great apes, the chimps, the bonobos, the orangutans, and humans, because we don't have tails. There's lots of difference between us and chimps. Probably the biggest one is we've got speech and language. Chimps can't even count. They're not interested when you try to teach them sign language. They haven't progressed, in recorded history. They're very violent and stupid compared to humans, and there's plenty of stupid, violent humans. Why are humans so much smarter? I mean, we're not just kind of smarter. We're way, way, way smarter. Even stupid humans are way smarter than chimps. Average IQ of a human is about 100. You can't even get a chimp to take an IQ test. And there's tons of difference. There's like 210 million. There's tons of differences in our DNA compared to theirs. The way it's counted is just to BS people. Let's see, whatever. Some evolutionary sites will say that we had a common ancestor with chimps 6 to 12 million years ago, that bonobos and chimps are diverged from a common ancestor about 2 million years ago. If humans evolved from chimps, they have 0 natural rights. That's a big deal. Humans are then just talking apes and basically are the farm animals owned by their ruler. If they were created, like I said, then they deserve natural rights. These are some references there. I got one more slide here. So there's a lot of what I would call dehumanization going around lately, more so than ever. First of all, like we talked about, the claim that humans evolved from monkeys. That's dehumanizing, to say that we're nothing different than a monkey that talks. By the way, if you want to learn about evolution, and here's some real experts. These are brilliant guys who, devoted their adult educations largely to studying things relevant to evolution and origin of life. James Tour is the best guide to learn about the origin of life. All these origin of life researchers, like in evolutionary biology departments of biochemistry, but they're a bunch of liars. I'm telling you, he just picks them apart. I say that, I majored in evolutionary biology. I became disenchanted with evolutionary biology when I was at Stanford, because what I saw was my fellow students, when I was in the senior elective classes, they sort of hated people. For example, whenever there was a discrepancy between the farmer and some environmentalist, they always wanted to take away the farmer's land. And I'm like, you know what? This guy's growing food for people. I know a lot of farmers. When I was young, it's a long story, but I had a lot of knowing of farmers. I like farmers. Okay, they're making food for us. Okay, they work their butts off. That's a very valuable thing. Whereas I saw this absolute contempt. I was around some pretty high-ranking environmentalists when I was a young evolutionary biologist before deciding to go to med school. And I can assure you, they really hated people. and they wanted nothing more than to get all the people off all this land and save it for the animals. There was a nature conservancy business. So I just tell you that they have a strong, they're not impartial scientists. They have a strong bias motive to get humans off land and give it to animals. All right. And so James Tour, he just kicks the crap out of them. He's so much smarter than them. He has such a better understanding of chemistry that he catches all their lies. And I've been amazed at how many lies there are in evolutionary biology. I was an A+ student at Stanford in evolutionary biology. I know a lot about it. I've read about 50 books related to the subject since, my old college days. So anyways, James Tour is the guy to go to for origin of life stuff. Eric Metaxas is more of a humanities type guy, but he's a very good writer, very bright guy. He wrote the book Is Atheism Dead? That's a good book. Stephen Meyer wrote the book Return to the God Hypothesis. Brilliant engineering guy. Michael B. He's another molecular biology biochemist guy. He's great on the subjects of evolution and what really happens with it. Same with Douglas X. He's a protein synthesis expert. So anyways, if you're interested in those subjects, those are a couple of experts. They've all got videos online. You can watch them. All right, now getting back to the DNA. Like I said, there's a lot of ways to count DNA. Humans have about 3.3 billion base pairs. And depending on, duplications and how much regulatory DNA you count, there's a lot of ways to decide how much overlap we have with chimps and other animals. And it's probably about 15% difference between human and chimp DNA, which is similar to us difference with other animals. When God designed everything, he used a similar template for a lot of things. Okay, you are not created in the, if we're not created in the image of God, you don't get natural rights. Yes, your only rights are what your owner gives you, and that's a lot of things too. You hear people say, oh, I think slavery is bad, but then they'll agree with everything necessary to make slavery happen. Well, that's just ignorant, and unfortunately, most people are pretty ignorant on these subjects. Your only right to life is what's granted by your owner, because you're just like a farm animal. You're like livestock, okay? Look what a farmer does with livestock, okay? You're not allowed to have a God. You're not allowed to have a religion. You got no right to free speech. Any of this stuff, okay? No right to privacy, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, be aware of that. Don't fall for these dehumanization things, because they're not going to make your life or your descendants' life any better. So anyways, what can be concluded from all the stuff about chimps and their diet? The bottom line is there's some similarities with chimps and us, but there's tremendous differences. And I don't think we can gain that much from studying them. Yeah, they eat about 97% plants. They love fruits. Maybe there's some wisdom there. It's a little bit interesting studying them. We could go on, but I think that's pretty much the gist of it.